to YouTube. So after the class, I can release the video, but usually I keep it kind of locked until I get to that point.
So is there a way to have
Go ahead.
each page that you have on your class?
Each page.
Yeah. Because see, remember I told you my mind was slower, which is why I'm taking your class so I can get it moving again.
Okay.
And I was trying to print the page, so because that way I could read each page.
So what you can do is you can use YouTube
Okay.
and freeze frame.
Freeze frame.
Yep. And you can also maximize and use the largest display, like press F11 on the keyboard, and that will maximize the screen and then maximize, you also want to maximize the YouTube frame. So that way you have the maximum resolution, and then you can take a screenshot, and then you can edit the screenshot with whatever software you want to use.
All I want to do is print the page.
I see.
Right.
Okay. All right. So last week we talked about the notifier. We talked about a few things, and your homework assignment, which is due on Wednesday, there are two. One is GCF, the greatest common factor, and the other one is the semester project proposal, basically. But I just call it document one, because there will be document two where I will give you some idea and you can revise your proposal and stuff like that. So those two are due on Wednesday. I just want to make sure that you guys remember to turn it in, okay? So, because I know you guys probably are working on it, but you have to remember to turn it in too, because otherwise I cannot count it.
Okay, so
Yes.
the project review is what we want to do. Is that just like one paragraph thing or a page thing or?
Try to make it as detailed as possible. Okay, so think it through a little bit, and then just kind of say, okay, I want to write an app that does blah 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 blah, and will be useful to these people, and so on. So the most important part is not so much, oh, I'm going to put a button here, I'm going to have a little scroll bar over there. The most important part is who is it for and why is it useful. Okay, how people are going to use your app and why it is useful. So focus on those points first, and then once you identify the purpose of the app and who's going to use it, then you can flesh out more details. Is that making any sense?
Yes.
Yes. And you can do anything basically. Okay, if it's something to help yourself, to do certain things like to organize or to establish a new habit. Hey, that's cool. I mean, if you want to work on something that can track your diet, okay, or your exercise throughout the day, I know there are many apps that can do that already. But if you want to customize one just for yourself, okay, you can do that. Yeah.
Speaking to that, like,
Yeah.
there are, so we can, I mean, it'd be nice to come up with something that's never been invented before, but beyond that,
Well, I mean, it depends on what you do, because I like to do I shoot air guns, like competition, matches, and they always use paper to keep track of the scores, which is really inefficient in many ways. Okay, like on windy days, people just get their little, we call it a scorecard, and the scorecard would just fly away with the wind, or if fly into the range, then you have to call code range just to retrieve a little piece of paper. I mean, so it's very inconvenient. But if you can have a phone, app to do it, not only can you keep the score, but you can also keep track of additional information. Like you can take a picture of the target. You can write down, your estimate of the distance to the target, and so on and so forth. So later on, you can go back and review, your scorecard and actually improve your skills.
I'm not saying that possible, but are we supposed to come up with something
No.
completely, or can it be somewhat related?
Yeah. Just something that is at appropriate difficulty level. And once you submit the proposal, I can evaluate that and see whether it's going to be, is it doable? I don't want you guys to take on something that's way too complicated and it's not doable in App Inventor. But at the same time, I don't want you guys to do something that's so simple that it is trivial, because you're not going to get any satisfaction by doing something that's trivial. So I want it to be at just about the right difficulty level. Yep.
So can, with this class, am I able to create an app? So main reason why I wanted to do
Yeah.
it is I wanted to present it to myself.
Yeah.
filter anxiety, do the countdown.
Mm-hmm.
Calm down.
Yep.
I want it to speak, in
Yep.
other words.
You can do
Tell
that.
myself, calm down. Okay,
So,
let's count to 10,
yep.
10, 9, 8, reverse.
Yes. So App Inventor does have text to speech, which means you can tell it what it needs to speak, and then
Speed.
and you can time it too. So there's a timer where you can say, okay, every second it will trigger a particular event,
Okay.
and in that event you just basically say, okay, I'm going to use text to speech, but you need to keep track of a string because I'm not sure whether it can read out the digits correctly.
Right.
So you can also keep track of a string, a list of strings which we'll get to today, like to spell out 10, 9, and so on. So in the case of anxiety or stress management, you can also have like quick tips, right? Get a straw, breathe through the straw. Okay, well, I mean that's a pretty common technique. Or keep like lifesavers in your pocket. Okay, so it's a trick. Basically, if you're really upset or if you're really about to do something, put a lifesaver in your mouth until it melts. Don't do a single thing.
I like that one.
So it gives yourself time to cool down, calm down, and collect and go like, okay, let me think this through as you go through the lifesaver. Yeah. So you can make an app like that, for sure. Yeah.
Create something
Yeah.
for that.
Yep. Yep. That's a good idea. And since we were talking about Asperger, okay, so people with Asperger syndrome, they cannot express their own emotions. Okay, not in a way that most people can interpret, nor can they interpret the feelings and emotions of other people. So, for Asperger, you can have an app that has what we call an emotion wheel. So if you have not seen an emotion wheel, it's really kind of cool. What it is kind of like a pie chart. So it groups related emotions into major sections, but then they also break it down into like smaller and more refined words. Like within anger, it will say frustration is one form of anger, and rage obviously is on the other end of the spectrum of anger. But these are all anger feelings. So it will have feelings that are positive, feelings that are negative, feelings that are like depressing, feelings that are related to anger and so on. So people with Asperger syndrome can kind of go through that wheel and refine and go like, okay, this is what I'm feeling. So they can better connect with their own feelings and they can tell other people how they're feeling, as opposed to other people just look and go like, I have no idea what this guy is thinking or feeling. They can now use these words. It's like, I'm feeling anxious, or I'm feeling embarrassed, or whatever word that best describes how they're feeling. So there are many ways to write your app. It's all up to you guys to find a way that you think, okay, I think this app is going to be useful for me, for someone that I know, for my family member. You can even write one for your cat. Okay, if you want your cat to have a virtual laser pointer thing on the screen to chase after, hey, do that. Yep, go ahead.
I just random. I just saw the other day someone invented it. It's such a great idea. Gloves that interpret sign language and speak.
Okay.
It's really awesome. Anyway, it's not really that, but I saw you're talking about the autism.
Yep.
Yeah, having to program it. Yeah.
Okay, so I apologize that I have a little bit of a cold today. It's not a flu. Don't worry. No one is going to die because of this. Everybody's going to die, but not because of this. So I do have a little bit of a cold, so the recording may have a little bit too much of a nasal sound to it. All right. So are there any questions about these two homework assignments before we kind of move on and talk about lists? Because that's what I really want to get to. Yes, go ahead. No, I do not. That's in the syllabus, but it's due on Wednesday, not due today.
Oh, okay. I forgot.
So it's due on the 13th, which I believe is Wednesday, not today.
A busy weekend, that's all.
Oh, okay, I understand. So, well, I guess it's good to have it due on Wednesday, so I have a chance to remind you guys. Yep,
The CG.
GCF.
CF.
Yep.
Dyslexic again. Switching things. What is that one
It's greatest common factor.
Okay.
Yep. So I want you to write an app. It describes. If you click on the homework, it will
Right,
describe.
okay,
So you need two numbers and a button, and it has to find the greatest common factor between those two numbers. And you can use a loop for that purpose. Yep. All right. Cool. So if there are no questions here, I'm going to move on to JSON, JSON. So this particular module is titled Data Representation Lists. KV stands for Key Value Pairs, and JSON, which stands for JavaScript Object Notation. So there's quite a bit of stuff going on here, and none of this actually has to do with, none of this is specific to app programming. It has to do with how data is represented behind the scenes, which I think is actually more important in many ways than to say, okay, how do I use a text box? Okay, a text box is like, okay, here's a box, you type something, and you can get a text back. Okay, so are we ready to move on to these topics? Okay, all right. So the first link here is not mine, okay, I did not write this. This one brings you to the W3C explanation of what is JSON, JSON. So it's a very quick introduction, and we'll kind of, oh, okay, I was clicking the wrong thing here. Okay, so I'll just focus on these sentences here. The first line, I have talked about it already. The second line says it's a lightweight format for storing and transporting data. So it basically is the ability to convert complex objects or complex data with structures into a very simple string or text format. Okay? So I will show you guys what it means, what it actually means a little bit later. It is often used when data is sent from a server to a web page, but also the other way around, when you transmit something from a web client to a server, you can use JSON. When you want to store something, you can use JSON or JSON. It's quote unquote self-describing and easy to understand. The only thing you have to, as a prerequisite to understand JSON is, do you understand how to nest parentheses or brackets in this case? If you say, yeah, I'm fairly confident, I understand the nesting of brackets, parentheses, and stuff like that, you're good to go. Okay, so it's not like XML where you have like a complex dictionary, of this is an open tag, this is a closed tag, and you have the attributes in between and stuff like that. This one is like easy. Okay, so are we good so far? All right. So with this in mind, I'm going to give you a program that I have written that I think will help to illustrate not only JSON, JSON, but also to illustrate what a list is. So let me go to App Inventor. And I think I signed into my account already, so that's good. Sorry? What?
I didn't think about when I sat here, I'm like blocking someone perfectly.
Oh, okay. I see. Yeah, they put these screens at a position where it's not really optimal. Like the bottom one third of the screen is basically useless because if I use that part, people in the back cannot see anything. So maybe I can help out by.
No, I think I moved over a little bit.
Oh, okay, you're offset a little bit. Okay. Well, with a class this size, everybody can be basically on the front row, and then we can stagger the chairs so that no one is blocking anyone. Okay, so I wrote this little program here. It doesn't do much, doesn't have a lot of components either. It has one gigantic text box. This is one gigantic text box here. Has one button that says make JSON or make a JSON. And it has one component that is not really used yet. Okay, it's a web one is a web component. Most of the work is done in the blocks. So in the blocks, now this is where we'll also start to talk about subroutines. But before we talk about subroutines, let's go to the click event handler of the button. And we'll focus on just the first block, which is the initialize local variable block. And let me highlight which part I'm talking about here. So I'm just going to highlight this particular block here. This block allows us to create a local variable, and I did not change the default name of the local variable. It is still called name, which is probably not the best way to name a variable, right? Unless it is really going to represent a name. So let me change that name. And this is one thing about App Inventor that's really kind of cool, is when you change the definition of a local variable, it will change all the references at the same time. So you don't have to go through the entire code and go like, okay, where did I use this variable throughout the code? So if I change this to temporary list, like so, you can see the reference got changed automatically, which is great because in most other editors, you can change how a variable is declared. Then you have to find all of those references to the same variable and change all of those at the same time. This one allows you to just change one place and you're good to go. So the next thing, let me highlight which block we are talking about here, is this block here. So this block is creating what we call a list. So a list is really the same thing as what a list looks like in HTML. So does anyone know what a list looks like from the perspective of an editor, like Microsoft Word or Google Document or something like that? Do you guys know what a list would look like?
Are you talking about like contents?
Yeah, just typing, just okay, let me show you what I mean by that. Okay, so the bullet points. So I'm going to use bullet points to represent this. So I will keep the program inside when I open up LibreOffice Writer, which is the same kind of program as Microsoft Word. Okay. There we go. So it's just an editor, nothing fancy about this. And I'm going to change the view to web view, so it doesn't have fancy formatting and stuff like that, which I don't need. And I'll put it side by side, which you will not see most of the screen, which is irrelevant. So we'll take a look at this list here that we are creating. So this particular list, or the top level of the list, has 3 items. The first item is the number 0. Okay, it's a value, it's a numerical value. The second item is lowercase a as text. And then the third one is another list. So the sublist, if I move my mouse a little bit, we can see what the sublist look like. So the sublist has 2 items, where the first item is lowercase b as text, and then the second item is lowercase c, also as text. Okay? So the way we would write it in a word processor is kind of like this. Okay? So I'm going to use a list representation in so the first item is a 0. The second item is lowercase a as text. So whenever we represent text, we use double quotes around them just to emphasize that it is text. Is that okay? So it's a convention in most programming languages to use either single or double quotes around text. Numbers do not need to be quoted. So now we have the issue of what about this one? This is an item that by itself is also a list. So the way we do this is kind of to use a nested list. So we'll use the further indent tool. Of course, I have to find it first. Where is that? Down with the insert. Yep, there we go. Thank you. So this is a sublist with B and C in it. So that's kind of what it looks like when we have a list of 3 items, 0A as the first 2, and then the third item by itself is also a list. So do we have any questions about this?
So
Nope. A is one item, and then the third item is a list with B and C. So maybe this is not the best way to represent it. Let me see if this is better. Would that because you have three items, three solid dots, which represents the three items at the outer level of the list. And then the third item, which is represented by the third solid dot, has two sub items in it. You can also kind of think of a list as a folder in a file system. So the folder is a container. You can put a number of items into a folder, or it can be empty. A list can be empty as well. Okay, is that okay? But you can also have a smaller list inside a list, just like you can have a folder inside another folder. So are we good with these concepts? But there is one major difference between a folder versus a list. Items in a list are addressed or designated by what we call the index number. So the 0 as a numerical value has an index of 1. The string or the text of A has an index of 2. And then the sublist itself has an index of 3. So within that, B has an index of 1, and the C has an index of 2. So are we doing okay so far with these concepts? We good so far? All right. Okay. So now the next question is, how do we turn this into text? In other words, if I have to transmit something, like this, okay, kind of a hierarchical structure of information, and I need to either store it or to transmit it, but I'm only allowed to send a single text value. How am I going to encode this into a text value? That is the question. Well, the answer starts with a J. JSON. Okay? So let me go ahead and actually run the program, and it will show you the JSON representation of this. Okay? So I'm going to run the program, and I'm just going to illustrate how to do it on the Linux side. The Windows side is a little bit easier. You don't have to run all of these things by hand, but in Linux you do. So it's not that big of a problem. It's just an extra step. Then we go to connect. We start the emulator. Okay, that's actually pretty quick. Because this program does not make use of multiple screens, I don't have to go through the other way. Remember last time I showed you guys how to upload and install the APK files? That's actually a better way to do things, but this way is a little bit faster and more convenient for simple stuff like this. So there we go. Now this entire program doesn't do anything except for that one button, which translates the list into a text representation. So I'm going to click this button, and that's it. This is how JSON encodes the list. So it's good to be able to see how the list is made and also the representation in JSON. So when you see a list, it basically every list uses a square bracket to open and another square bracket to close. If you have an empty list, it will just be open and then followed immediately by a close bracket. Is that okay?
Where did
Yes.
on your button it
Yeah.
says make JSON.
Yes.
Where did that come from?
It came from the designer view of the app. So if I switch back to the app inventor and go to the designer view, it is right here.
Okay.
So when I designed the screen, I put in a large text box here and also a button at the bottom. So when I run the app, when I run the app, this is what it looks like.
Okay. So right down there on that screen, that's where you actually made the box, make JSON.
This is where I designed the user interface,
Okay.
but when I run it, this is the actual run. You know,
Got it. Okay.
so you can look at this as the blueprint
Okay.
of something. So it's really just the design of something, but it's not the actual thing.
Okay.
But when we are running it in an emulator or an actual Android device, then you're actually running it.
Okay. Now go back to your code,
Okay?
please.
So that when you refer to code, I'm guessing that you're referring to the blocks.
The blocks. Yes.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Wow.
But this is really helpful because it allows you to create um, something that is structured. In other words, when I use the word structured, it means you can embed things, in nested levels. Okay, that's structured. So when you fill in a form, a lot of times, the information in a form is structured, because when they ask you what is today's date, that has the year, the month, and the day of month. But the three items together is really just a date. But that date is only a part of many fields in a form. So when they ask you for your name, then it has two subfields of what is your first name and what is your last name. When they ask you for your address, it has at least street address, city, state, and zip code most of the time. Okay? So you can group items into a particular list and then put that list as a subcomponent inside another list and so on. So is that okay?
Right. I was looking at. Okay. So initialize local JS screen. Um, where did that? Oh, I turned it off. No, let me turn it. I had to turn it off. Sorry.
That's all right.
Now it's turned off.
Okay.
Okay. Get templates, that puts it in there. Call. The next thing is thing. Thing is a word from.
Okay, wait. Oh, don't worry about the purple thing. Yeah, the purple thing is a little bit more complex. Okay, so don't worry about that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, this thing here is a little bit more
Okay.
complex than I
you.
want to talk about in the second week or third week. Okay, so I'm going to move it out of you here.
Oh, good. It's like, where the heck that come from?
Now this it's called a subroutine. It is a very useful thing, but it's a little bit difficult to explain at this point.
Okay, good.
Okay, so this is how I make the list, and I assign the local variable temp list to the list here.
Right.
So on the next slide, what I did, okay, so this is kind of awkward because, when you read this, you have to read it backwards to figure out what it does.
Yes.
So I'm going to get the local variable temp list, which basically is just your kind of list here.
Yes.
And it will pass it as a parameter, as thing, to a subroutine called makeJSON.
Okay.
Now, how does makeJSON work? You can just look at it as magic for now.
Okay, good.
You just say, okay, here's something, I want you to turn it into text. Poof, and out comes the text. But the ultimate part is I'm using textbox1.text to reflect the actual JSON representation of this list. That's the important part. Is that okay?
Yeah, because I was wondering where set text box one dot text, where that came from, because I don't see
That comes from here. So when you see this thing here,
Yes,
it comes from here.
that screen. Got
Yep.
it. Okay, that's what I was.
Yep. So this is what we call, kind of, object-oriented programming,
Okay.
where you think about, okay, who owns the text area that I want to change? Text box one. So you go to text box one, and then one of the items available allows you to change the text of the text box. And I'm just using a text box to reflect the result in this case.
Okay, I see now where this. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So are we still doing okay so far? Okay. So I'm going to publish, this AIA file. I'm going to upload it to Canvas so that you guys can have access to it. Okay. So when you have access to it, the first thing you probably want to do is not to really question how this make JSON is done, okay? If you want to try to figure it out, that's fine too, okay? But to copy into your backpack, because you might want to put this into your own project, and this is how you can do it. I'll give you the AIA file. You upload it to your App Inventor project files, okay? Once you do that, you go into the project, you drag make.json into your backpack, and then you go into your own project, you go to the backpack, you drag make.json out of the backpack into your own project. That's how you copy and paste resources between projects. Because this can be very handy. Is that okay? All right? Cool? So if make.json can make a list, can it deal with simple items? Okay, so I'm going to test it here and say, can it deal with just text? What would text look like if I just convert it into the JSON format? Okay, so I'm just going to say this is a test string. And then we'll go back to the emulator, which should be updated by now. And then click make JSON again. And this is how, this is what the JSON representation of a single string looks like. It's very simple. It just has double quote, and then the content of the string, and then another double quote to end the string. It does not need a bracket. The bracket indicates we have a list. Nope, it is not, because JSON can deal with a string without a list. Yep. Then the next question is, what if the string has the double quote character itself? Okay. So I want to emphasize test here. So this is a test string. Okay. So isn't that going to interfere with the the JSON representation? So we'll go back to the emulator, test again. And you can see something that's kind of strange, because you can see how there's a backslash in front of the double quote. The backslash is called an escape character in most modern programming languages, which basically means, if you're going to print a string, or when you need the actual value of a string like this, the backslash is called escape, which basically means sometimes, it just means the next character is just the way it is. It's literally just the double quote. So that means this double quote here is not ending the begin double quote, because it is a backslash double quote. Same thing for this backslash double quote here. So this way, the double quote does not interfere with the syntax of a string by escaping it. Is that okay?
So in other words, do not put the double quote in.
You can double.
Like that.
Oh, that's a good question too. What if your actual string needs a double quote? What is it going to look like? Okay, what is a backslash? Okay, that's called a backslash. Like this will look like in JSON. Okay, and go to the simulator. Run it. It doesn't do the multi-line thing. Darn it. Okay. Well, I can scroll it. Okay. This is it. So a single double quote becomes single backslash becomes double backslash. The first backslash is escape. Then the second backslash is, what are you escaping? I'm escaping another backslash. So two backslashes will be representing the value of a single backslash in a string. If you want a double quote, then the backslash and the double quote will represent a single double quote. You don't have to worry about this. This is all done by, guess what? It's all done by the magical make.json. So make.json automatically does this, okay? I actually read up the specification of JSON. There are some other characters that need to be escaped as well, but since you cannot type those characters in App Inventor, I'm not too worried about that. Like the backspace character, the line feed character, and stuff like that, you can't really type it anyway, so I'm not too concerned about that. So are we good so far? Yep. All right. Yeah, go ahead.
Is it all in one line? The whole JSON file
The
is one
whole,
line?
yes.
Okay.
So it's not okay. So new lines,
Hold it.
right? So new line has no meaning in JSON, other than making things look nicer.
Yeah.
So to you, yes, it's kind of cool to have the proper formatting with all the new lines and whatnot. But to a computer who's most likely just a computer reading JSON,
Yeah.
it doesn't make any difference. Yep.
Okay.
So is there a way to make it where in most word processors they go one line and then it automatically goes to the next line?
To wrap around. Well,
Perfectly.
let's see. So we can go to Designer and click on text box 1 and look through its properties and see if there's one that says wrapping around. It has multi-line, which I don't think is the same thing, because multi-line basically means you can press the enter key, you can have multiple lines. But what we want is if the content of one single line exceeds to what the screen can handle, it needs to automatically wrap to the next line.
Correct.
And I do not think that is available here. I could be wrong, but we can try that. I don't think it's going to fix the problem that we are trying to fix here.
What does text alignment mean?
Well, it's either left, center, or right.
Oh,
So I don't think that's going to fix the problem that we are trying to fix here either. So as far as I can tell, I don't think we can fix that problem. We can give it one more try.
Change the height from
Oh, okay.
from
It does work.
yeah. So what did you do?
I think it's the multi-line that fixes it.
Just selecting that.
that's
Yep.
misleading.
It is misleading, yes.
Multi-line.
Yep.
Oh, flag. Okay, so if you select the
Right.
multi-line,
You can also change that programmatically inside the program. But if it's static and you just want it one way, you can just use the property to do it. Yep.
We're not really meant to see the JSON encoded text anyways, though, right?
Yes, this is only for demonstrating what it looks like, and also for me to debug, make JSON.
Okay.
Yep. So are we good so far with the JSON format? Yes? Okay, all right. Create. I can explain it. It's already done. It's just that I need to explain how it gets the job done.
So it's like, is that out of scope in this class?
It's out of scope for today, but eventually once we get to subroutines, then
I was gonna say, isn't it just a lot of look for this, if this, put it in there, if not, move on, whatever. Like look for things that need to be escaped, look for numbers, look for
yep.
text.
But you have to nest all that stuff, in the proper way. So that's why you end up with something that looks like this, with a multi-branch conditional statement. If it's text, you do one thing. If it is something else, you do something else. So there are a few tricks that I have to put into, like because you have to use a comma as a separator between items in a list. So the question is, do you know when you need a comma? The first item does not, but all subsequent items need to have a comma before the item as a separator. So there's a little bit of a trick to do that. There are many ways to do it. It's just that I chose one particular way to do it. So for today, yeah, go ahead.
You didn't take this from somebody else's APK?
No, this is simple enough. I don't need to do that. All right. So, but this is big. Okay, this is important and it's big because once we know how to use a list, how to use JSON to encode a list into text, then we can now say, if if I'm allowed to send text, I can now send structured information from one end to another end, or I can store text. I can store structured information if I'm just allowed to store text. Okay, it's kind of important. So for now, I want you to kind of divert your attention back to my list here. But this time, instead of making this list, I'm going to make it so that it looks more like data in a form. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of all of these stuff here. So the first thing is I have the name of a person. Okay, it's not uncommon that a form would ask for a name, right? So within the name, it is also not uncommon that it will ask you for. Okay, I thought it's this one. There we go. No, first name and last name. So we'll have the given name or first name, and then we'll have the family name, which is the last name. I prefer to use given name versus family name because in Chinese, we use the family name first, which is totally confusing because when we tell people, we say, oh, we write our last name first. It's like, what?
And you don't have a comma that shows the.
We do not use a comma in between either. Yep. So that's confusing from the syntax perspective. So using the name, given name versus family name is a little bit better that way. Okay. And then we may ask for the second item, maybe address. Okay. And inside address, we'll have the sub-entries. And the sub-entries is going to be street address, followed by city, followed by state, and then followed by zip code. Okay, which is not uncommon. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that you see all the time. So now the question is, how is this going to look like? First, as a list, and then two, how is it going to look like as JSON? And we will even throw in some actual values here. Okay, so we'll throw in some actual values. The given name is me, Tech. Family name is Young. Street address is 4700 College Oak Drive. And for those of you who are going like, oh, I can now see where the tag lives, go ahead and look it up on your Google Maps and find out where what you're gonna find. Yes. Yep. That's the ARC address. So you guys will look at them and go like, oh, that's where we are. So tech lives near where I live. Yeah, when I see my students at the supermarket, they sometimes they go like, oh, they did not, at first, yeah, exactly, they did not realize that I need to go shopping too. And I think the zip code here is 95841. Yep. All right. So what is this going to look like as a list? And within that list, how are we going to encode it into JSON? So now we get into the concept of what is a key value pair. Okay. So the word key is really, it's really just saying, okay, what is the name of the value? Okay. Where do I find it in the form? So in this case, name is the key of the whole entry representing my name. And then the key is address, ADDRESS, is the key of all the subcomponents that is representing the details of the address. Is that okay? So the key is nothing more than what is the name of the field in a form.
You're mentioning the key and stuff because theoretically you're sending the data via JSON to a database to put it in there.
It could be a database, could be just a text entry that I store to your local file. It doesn't really matter because it's just the name. The word is key within the list. Yeah, go ahead.
When you send this in JSON,
Mm-hmm.
you're not telling JSON beforehand, here are the things I'm going to be sending, name, first name, whatever. It is actually set within the JSON string, right?
Once
it's hard to ask the question. I don't know if I'm making sense.
That's okay. So let's go ahead and find out what it looks like first as a list. Okay. So this list has two at the top level. It has two entries. The first entry has to do with the name. The second entry has to do with the address. We agreed that at the top level there are two entries. Okay. Now under name it has two sub-entries, and then under address it has four sub-entries. Are we good so far? Okay. So what we'll do is I'm going to keep showing this part here, although I do need to kind of interact with this part. Okay, this is what I'll do. I can always kind of move this a little bit so that we can now see both sides at the same time. And I'm going to go to a clean area to make that list, okay, just so that we don't have the interference of the other stuff. So we'll toss this. I don't need that anymore. And then we'll create that list over here. So if you're using anything about list, you click on the list block here. And the second item from the top is to make a particular list. So this will work, okay? And indeed, we only need two items at the top level. So at the top level, this is good, okay? We're good here. Then we have to think about, okay, what about inside the top level? Well, this is where things get a little bit interesting. So I'm going to duplicate, stick it here, and I duplicate this and stick it here. Then you go like, what is going to be in this list here, and what's going to be in this list? These two are what we call a KV pair, a key value pair, where the first item of this thing is a key, which is the name of a field in a form, and then the second item is the value of that particular item in a form. Okay, so I can, since I'm going to share this with you guys at the end of the class, this is what I'll do. I can add comment and basically explain what this is. Okay, so this list represents the entire form. And then this part here, add comment. This list, this is a key value pair where the first item is the name of a field. So in this case, it is the field name. Is that okay? So if you don't want it to show the comment, you can click on the question mark again, so you can toggle it on and off, any way you want. But I'm just using this, as a way to self-document this particular program. Oh, so that means this item here, which is the name of the field in a form, is really just name itself. So it is just by itself name, like that, okay? Which also means the second item is going to be what? What should I put into the first item of the second list? Address. Very good. Are we doing okay so far with this particular form? So the overall list is the entire form here. The first item of that list is a pair. It's always a pair, where the first item of the pair is the name of the field, and then the second item is the value of that field. Are we good so far?
Don't make it go away yet.
Oh, no, it's not going to go away. This is what we'll be working on for the next, I would say maybe in the next 10 minutes or so. The concept is what is important. And also remember, at the end of the class, I'm going to share the project with you. So, you have full access to the actual code. So it is the concept that is important. Okay, we good? All right. So now we look into the value of this item here. Okay, so I will continue with this comment. And now the question is, okay, see with the comment, you can always kind of drag and change the size of it. Okay, so the second item of this pair represents the value corresponding to the field. Okay. But that is kind of interesting because I only got one slot here, but we have two entries because we got the given name and the family name. How are we going to do this? Make another list. Exactly. Make another list of key value pairs. Okay, so I'm going to go to list again, pull out another make a list. Okay, and then this time, I will say, let me add a comment here. Okay, and I'll write down this is the key value pair list that forms the value of the name field. Okay, so it is by itself a list. It's a list of two entries where the first item of this list corresponds to the given name being tech, and then the second item of this list is corresponding to the family name of me being Young. Is that okay? So what do I put, in the first slot? It's not just tech, because if I just say tech here, then it is not clear, is tech corresponding to the given name or the family name? It is not clear. So we're going to have to spell it out and say the given name is tech, the family name is Young, which means, once again, we have another list here. Yeah, go ahead.
So this is what I was trying to get at. Like you're describing sort of like if this was a form, right?
Yep,
If this was a form, you're basically sending the title of a cell or whatever, the form field, with the information in it as well.
correct.
Like your whatever the title of this field would be given and Keon
Yep,
is in both.
yep.
Is there ever a way to like
Have it implied?
yeah
You can, but if you have it implied, then the ordering becomes very important, which is okay when your items have a relatively short or small items of a small number of items. But when you are starting to deal with something that has a large number of items, and some have default values and do not need to be specified, then it gets really messy.
Well, I just worry like this would be sent on post or something. Is that how? Is
Say,
that
say that again.
would this be sent like via post?
Post.
Yeah, if it was in a form.
It's usually okay. So this part is usually the reply from a post. So when you're, yeah, but when you're posting, you can certainly send the JSON text as the argument of a post, which means you can send it this way as well. So let me.
Sorry, last question. In reality, they would encrypt all this, right?
Yes. Well, you don't have to do it because HTTPS is end-to-end encryption. So as long as you're using HTTPS when you're doing your post and getting the reply back, you don't have to do any extra, encryption because it's an end-to-end encryption. Now, but you still have to, from the security standpoint, you still have to kind of worry a little bit because anything running on the client side can potentially hack your app and see the cookies and other things that you have stored locally. So if you're worried about the device, the mobile device itself getting hacked and be able so that other apps can see what they're not supposed to, then you have to do the local side, encryption if you feel there's a need.
And just in general, for this class, are we gonna have to worry about that for our apps?
No, not really.
Okay.
Yeah.
That seems like a whole other level of
E-
knowledge. Yeah.
Well,
It's good to know.
there are several reasons why we don't need to, or we cannot worry about that. Um,
Another class.
there's another class, the CISS classes. Those are responsible for computer security, so there's that. But the other thing is App Inventor does not really have a very good. Oh, okay. I just clicked on.
That's why that goes off the class, right?
So App Inventor doesn't really have a very good library of computer security related stuff. Okay. But getting back to this example, this is the entire content of just name. So name is the key of the first part of the form, but name itself has a value that is a list because it has multiple components. And within that list, each item is once again a key value pair. The key is given, the value is tag. This time it is not a complex thing anymore, it's just your text. The second item has a key of family and a value of onion. So I'm using the key value pair concept consistently throughout the representation of what I want to represent here.
Okay. So where you have make a list,
Uh-huh.
given, you don't have to put the, what's that, double quote? I mean, the semicolon
No, you don't.
for it to show up like that?
No, because so typically you don't use the colons or the punctuations
Okay.
as the key of a particular item in a
Okay.
list.
Got
You
it.
just use the name.
Okay.
I mean, if you use a colon, you can, but then you have
No,
to
I
use
was
the colon
wondering
consistently.
how it would show.
Because if I don't use the colon here, it doesn't look as good. So I
Okay.
need a punctuation to separate
Okay.
the key from the value when they're on the same line when I use a text editor to do it. So that's really just for the visualization, make it look nicer that way. Yep,
If you were to have a form, it would already have given in there, so you don't
correct.
have to type in there. The only thing that would be typed would be a text box that you could.
Correct, yes. But in the representation as a list, you still need that given. Yep. So, excuse me. So I'm going to do the rest here. Okay, I'm going to duplicate and put it into the address, except this one needs 2 more items. So I'm going to have 2 more items here. So this is how you can extend a list to have more items. Okay. And then we're going to have to duplicate this and then duplicate it one more time and then make just a whole lot of changes to it. So instead of given, we have street address. Oh, okay, misspelled it. Oh, actually, it did not misspell it. It's my keyboard that has a bouncing issue. Yeah, blame it on the keyboard, right? I just lost that game because of the stupid keyboard. Now I need to go buy a $200 gaming keyboard, right? All right, so this is state CA, and then we got zip me95841. All right, so this is it. Okay, it is complex, right? Well, it's not really complex. Okay, it's just that everything is a key value pair. Now, the entire list is not a key value pair. It is just a value. Okay, but it is a list of key value pairs. So are we good with this concept so far? So are you guys ready to look at what it looks like when it's translated into JSON? Sorry?
I think so.
I think you guys know what it would look like already, but it's good to kind of test it out. So we'll take out this string here and then plug in this really big and ugly list. Snap it here. Go back to the emulator. Okay. Click make JSON. Uh-oh, Stack Overflow. What? Huh. Stack Overflow.
So let's say you wanted to debug which line is off.
Uh-huh.
Are you able to do it?
Well, yes and no.
Or you're able to comment
You cannot. There's no way to stop it. That's the issue. Well,
Can this go in order still?
well, I do have one warning. Let's find out where the warning is first.
Don't you think like in this on app inventor, isn't it still go in order of execution? And if that block is covering the other block, it might cause issues.
Say that one more time.
Doesn't app inventor still go in order?
Go in what order?
How it processes your blocks?
Nope. The blocks are. It's all based on which one is triggered. See, this one, it belongs in a block that is triggered by clicking.
Forgot you put it on there. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's event-driven type of programming where if nothing happens, then no block is going to run. So a particular block will only run in response to something happening. Can be a click, can be a long click, can be the main screen getting initialized, can be someone clicking the back button or something like that. But it's always triggered by something. Can be a time event too. If you have a timer, like a clock, it can be based on time as well. All right, so let me go back to the emulator, make JSON, and it still has that stack overflow, which probably has to do with my recursive subroutine. And this is where debugging gets a little bit tricky, get really tricky, I should say, because the subroutine is down here, and it is a recursive subroutine where it calls itself. It is when it calls itself that we have an issue. So the recursive call is right here.
So you created this subroutine?
I created this
Okay, so
subroutine.
you have to do both sections.
Where's your warning in the end?
Hmm?
Did you see where your warning was?
It's the text box that we dragged off originally from the
Oh, okay.
text box.
Oh yeah.
It's this one here, which is of no consequence, right? So we can just get rid of it, and now we have no warnings anymore. All right. So I think it might have to do with the number of levels that we have to deal with. But this is not even a whole lot. I mean, this is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 levels of stacking. Well, in this case, debugging can be a little bit tricky. So I'm just
Reboot, man, that always works.
hmm?
Get rid of that.
Reboot.
Reboot.
Reboot your emulator.
Shake it a few times first, then reboot, right?
So are you able to comment part of the program where the code is just ignored, like a comment, when you have an issue?
Like comment out chunks of the
Yes.
code.
You can-
Exactly.
You can so-called comment out stuff.
That way you still have it like a comment area
Yeah.
while you're.
Disable a block.
Thank
Yeah.
you, that's the word I'm looking for. I couldn't think of
So
it.
you can disable a block, by clicking on the block,
Uh-huh.
and then you can just disable it.
Okay.
So now this block is disabled,
Okay.
and it won't do any recursion. So we have a list like that.
Okay.
So we know that part works. Then you can go back to here, and then you can re-enable the block, and then try again, and this time it's going to have a stack overflow issue again. So one way to fix this particular, potential problem is to figure out, how, what is the last thing it's trying to process. Yep, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask if when you like drag off the address part and try it, maybe that's just to see.
Well, let me show you one particular debugging, tool. We can use the notifier. Remember, in the notifier, we can send it to the log,
Yeah.
and then on the command line, I can see that.
Oh.
But if you don't want to do it that way, there's a really kind of cheap, easy way to do it. So before I call this, okay, which means I need to know what I'm trying to make the JSON of what item. I can now go to the screen 1. I'm going to abuse the title of screen 1 because that's going to be displayed. So I would hopefully have something that I can see. And then we just replicate this part here and stash it here. So as it continue to work on stuff, the title of screen one is going to change depending on, which items JSON I'm trying to process. Okay, so we'll give that a try here. And so given is the item.
It's like the first item.
That's how far it got.
Well, it got all the way down there. So the question is, did it get back up correctly?
So that's after the first one, but it was working before.
Yep.
Hold the address.
Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, make it still works.
Well, I can try to fix that later. I had this subroutine working before, so I know that it worked. And okay, so let me explain another thing for those of you who have taken classes and you know what recursion is. So Stack Overflow typically happens when you have an endless recursion. In other words, you keep doing it recursively.
Like a loop?
Like it's kind of a form of a loop, but it's not really a loop. So in this case, it really should not be doing that because I wouldn't be doing this unless I have a list. And if it is a list, I look at each item in the list, and I only do the recursive call based on the item of the list, which means it should not be endless. At some point it's going to hit something like given, where it is not itself a list, and it will just return the string given, and then we'll go back to here, and then we'll set the separator, and then we'll go back to get the next item, which is going to be tag.
Maybe just splits too many times. Did you try it with that many key value pairs?
But that's the first one though.
Hmm?
Well, it might have like not known where to split off from there.
Well, it worked before, so we know that it worked before, so we can, okay,
You just take out that second.
we just make a smaller sublist here. Yep. And that one worked. So you can see, name is the key, and then the value is the list of key value pair lists. And the first key value pair list is given tag. The second one is family Aoyong. Okay? So that part does work. Okay. But if I plug this back in here, and then put this entire thing here, then it doesn't work.
You really want to keep on right, put the address in there before you put the whole thing in there, just to make sure.
Oh, well, sure.
Gotta go piece by piece.
Yep.
It's good to know how to debug. Wow. That's
Yep, so that worked.
language.
Yep. So that works too.
It's nested in square brackets.
And then we put that in, and it stopped working. Yep, it didn't like that. I think it might be running out of memory,
Yeah.
which means I can try to run this on my phone. Yeah, we got 5 minutes. Why not?
So if you were to delete the last two entries, make a list of the second one under address. Okay.
We know it's not the algorithm. It's not the
No, but I was
subroutine.
wondering if there's a list, a max. So under the address, if you were to get rid of the last two lines.
No, but it's not. But that's not going to deepen the levels.
Okay.
It's the level that is important. So if I have one more level, because if you look at this particular list here and you look at this particular list, they have the same depth.
Right.
And by including this extra list, it's just increasing the depth by 1.
Okay.
And that is what's causing the stack overflow.
Okay.
But we know the algorithm is not incorrect because otherwise it would have crashed regardless when we are even looking at the sublist.
Okay.
Run it on your phone, that'll really prove it, right?
Yep, so I'm going to use my phone. So let me reset connection here, build the APK, and of course I need to make sure that I have a USB cable for my phone, which I do. Because the emulator has very limited resources.
Yours.
Yep, my
You gotta update that. Figure out a way.
I will figure out a way.
Cause I don't know why mine's different. I don't know if other people's is everybody else's, but I have a whole different phone and everything that shows up.
So it works on your phone?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, with my emulator.
Okay. All right, so I got to do two things here. Oh, this may or may not work. Let me think about this. Okay, so first we need screen copy. Which allows you to see my screen. Okay, so there's my screen. And then the second thing is I need to use a scanner to scan the QR code. So I got tools, QR code scanner. Because I need to build to do a QR code. And you can see you guys here.
Hey, I didn't sign a release.
This is how we take roll now. Send that picture to Facebook.
There's an app for you. You just scan your class and it takes roll automatically.
Yep, and use Facebook, right? Facebook. Not only will I find out, who's in my class, I also know who their friends are.
Not if I don't have Facebook. Which I don't.
Even if you don't have Facebook, some of your friends may have Facebook. So Facebook may know you already, even though you don't have an account.
Really?
Of course, man.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's scary.
And they can do facial recognition. Yeah. Oh yeah, they can definitely do facial recognition. Yep.
And your selfie camera can do facial recognition.
And I thought
You
I
can
was
use your face
avoiding
to unlock your
everything.
phone.
I
So
thought I was
if it
avoiding
common man
everything.
has that.
Okay.
Wow. I guess there's no hiding from anything, huh?
Nope. That's why I gave up on it a long time ago.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So I'm going to install that.
Thanks for popping the bubble. Oh, you can't hide from nothing. Let's just see.
But Facebook
Okay.
has so much information now, they're only gonna just focus on the people that are, they're interested in, that they might be doing something wrong,
Oh,
Okay,
okay.
I got it
Stay out of trouble,
downloaded.
and you
They
probably
say
not
I'm
be
boring,
watched,
so yeah, I'm not needed. But
Well, you may be boring, but your social security number is not.
oh, that makes me feel worse. That's why they're checking on me to see if oh yeah, she's still alive. Use that number.
Okay, but where is it putting it onto? Did they actually install it? Okay. Okay, try it one more time. Tools, QR code scanner. Open, there we go. Okay. Did it actually download it? Nope. Darn it. Okay. I'm gonna have to figure out a way to do this. Okay, one more thing we can try. It's just to use ADB. It probably won't work because the version of my Android may be out of date. I mean, this ADB is out of date compared to that one. So
So I would believe it would work.
oh, it does. Okay. ADB install dash R. What is the name of the app? JSON. JSON. Okay.
So do we have to do all this or?
No, no.
Okay.
But I do want to find out what the problem is. We're almost done. Getting there.
I thought you had the class to 10:30, the room.
No, no. We're supposed to go by. Okay, where is that program installed?
You think there'd be a buffer between the classes because a lot of classes run like up to
Yeah, that's
five
why I'm
minutes late.
Right
surprised
there.
they're coming
There we
in.
go.
First row.
Yep.
Because I thought there was a buffer where,
You know,
yeah, they're not supposed to come in into their
Yep.
time.
So this one works.
run 5 minutes after
So
theirs.
it's just a
Yeah. So it's the emulator phone being,
Oh,
And
no
there's
it's
a
just
character extension.
doesn't have enough resources. Yeah, it does look different because my phone has a 1080p resolution, as opposed to the emulator phone, which has a very low resolution.
Oh my God.
Yeah, but it does work. So it has to do with the amount of resources on the device itself. I just basically ran out of memory on the emulator device.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's got 0.1 megabyte of RAM.
All right.
Good